Hello. Today we are going to be reading through chapters 1 and 2 of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Scary story. We're not just going to be reading the words, we're going to be stopping and talking about interesting vocabulary or expressions or strange things that maybe if you're learning English and you're pretty advanced, you might not understand. So this is a great way to gain some vocabulary or gain a deeper understanding of English, sort of a guided reading. So we're doing this live, and if you have questions, I want you to ask them in the comments. Please don't be afraid to stop me and say, what does this mean? I don't understand this. That's the whole point of doing this video live, that we can talk about the interesting words and phrases that we find as we go. Let's see. So let's get started. I forgot what I was going to say. Let's get started with Chapter 1 of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Chapter 1. John Harker's Journal. 3 May, Bistritz, left Munich at 8:35 p.m. By the way, this is written in the form of a journal or a diary, and sometimes if you're just writing notes to yourself, maybe you don't say, I left Munich at 8:35. Left Munich, that's enough. He knows what he's writing. That just makes it look more authentic. 3 May Bistritz, left Munich at 8:35 on 1st May, arriving at Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46, but train was an hour late. Budapest seems a wonderful place from the glimpse which I got of it from the train and the little I could talk and the little I could walk through the streets. I feared to go very far from the station, as we had arrived late and would start as near the correct time as possible. The impression that I had, this word impression is used in an interesting way here. Usually, let's see. If we look at a picture of an impression. So literally, they don't really have any. Let's see if we can find something here. Oh, okay. Maybe if you've gone to the dentist, you've had some. This happened to me. I've had this before. You know, when the dentist takes the shape of your teeth, they press something down on your teeth to get the shape of your teeth. And that's called an impression. That's an impression. An impression of your teeth. But when you get an impression in your mind, it's how you see something, the way that you feel or perceive something. So if something makes an impression on you, it puts that shape in your brain, whatever it is. A lot of times you can use it when you're trying to understand something. Like, I get the impression that he doesn't like to talk to people. That means he didn't say he doesn't like to talk to people, but I'm just getting signals. Maybe that's a good way to think of it. I'm getting signals. It's putting that impression in my mind. So this guy is exploring Vienna, and he's making observations about Vienna. And what does he say? Where was it? The impression I had was that we were leaving the West and entering the East. So he's traveling from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, and he's talking about, what is he talking about, Vienna or Budapest? Arriving at Vienna early next morning. Train was an hour late. Budapest. No, he must be in Budapest, and he's saying, I'm getting the signals. I'm getting the signals that we've left Western Europe and we have arrived in the East, in Eastern Europe. I get the impression that we've gone from west to east. It's a dramatic change, especially in the 1890s, going from Vienna to Budapest. Very different. The impression I had was that we were leaving the west and entering the east, and the most western of splendid bridges over the Danube, which is here of noble width and depth, took us among the traditions of Turkish rule. We left in pretty good time, and came after nightfall to Klausenburg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper. When something is done up, I guess here, the way that they're using it, it kind of just means that this is the style in which it was made, or these are the things that they used for it. I had chicken done up with herbs. I wouldn't talk like that, but you could, and that just means I had chicken and they put a lot of herbs on it. And here he says, I had chicken done up with pepper, with red pepper. In Hungary, paprika is a famous spice. Which was very good, but thirsty. And this mem, I guess, would mean like memo or something like that, like a memo. Remember, get the recipe for Mina. So maybe that's his girlfriend or his wife. So he's thinking, oh, I really like that. I should get the recipe, and then maybe my wife can make it later. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika Hendel, and that, as it was a national dish, I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians. I found a smattering of German very useful. A smattering means like a little bit. So maybe he studied a little bit of German from a book, and so his smattering of German, his little bit of German, is being very useful in Budapest. You might use that for food. I like toast with a smattering of butter. That's not true because I like a lot of butter on my toast. But if I like just a little bit, I could say smatter. A smattering of jelly. I found my smattering of German, my very little German, very useful here. Indeed, I don't know how I should have been able to get on without it. To get on, there's a phrasal verb to get on or to get by, which means to survive, to make it through a difficult situation. So he says, I don't know how I would have survived without my smattering of German in Budapest. I don't know how I would have got on without my smattering of German. Having had some time at my disposal when in London, I had visited the British Museum and made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania. It had struck me that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail. If something strikes you, strike means hit. And you can use the words strike, hit, to mean I suddenly realized, or it became obvious to me. So he's in the library looking at maps and doing research about this area, Transylvania, and it hit him. He suddenly realized, it suddenly became obvious to him that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with the noblemen of that country. So it became obvious to him that studying the country would be very useful later when he goes to meet this important man, Count Dracula. I find that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of 3 states, Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukovina, in the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work giving the exact locality of Castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country, and yet to compare with our own Ordnance Survey maps, but I found that Bistritz, the post town, named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Mina. In the population of Transylvania, there are four distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them are the Wallachs, who are the descendants of the Dacians, Magyars in the west, and Zekiles in the east and north. I'm going among the latter, who claim to be descended from Attila and the Huns. This may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathian Mountains. You know, if you don't know, a horseshoe is shaped like this. So I guess I'm not familiar with how the Carpathian Mountains look, but they must make a shape like a U or an N. That's a horseshoe shape. As if it were the center of some sort of imaginary whirlpool. If so, my stay may be very interesting. And then we have this mem, which I think means memo, like remember to do this. I must ask the Count about all of them. I didn't sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. Now, that word queer means strange or bizarre, unusual. I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling. Howling is the sound of a dog in the middle of the night. Oh, that's howling. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it, or it may have been the paprika, for I had to drink up all the water in my carafe, and was still thirsty. Towards morning I slept, and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been sleeping soundly then. To sleep soundly means that nothing can wake you up. So maybe sometimes somebody will say, "How did you sleep?" If you answer soundly, that means a very good sleep. Nothing could disturb you. Nothing could wake you up. Didn't you hear all the noise last night? No, I'm a sound sleeper. That means nothing can wake me up when I'm sleeping. Nothing can disturb me. I had for breakfast more paprika and a sort of porridge of maize flour, which they said was mamaliga, and eggplant stuffed with force meat. I don't know what force meat is. I guess here let's learn something today. Force meat. Let's see if we can find a picture. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that's what you called it, but I think I've probably had it before. Something kind of like a sausage. This is. Can we see these pictures? Wait a minute. Like this. I'm sure I've probably had something like that before. I guess like maybe a cold sausage or something. Oh, wait a minute. A very excellent dish, which they call impletata. And then we have this mem again. I guess that means, I'm just going to read that as memo. Although I don't know if it's memo, why you should have, maybe it means like memorandum or something like that. Something to remember. But I'm just going to read it memo from now on. Get the recipe for this also. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? Unpunctual. Punctual means to be on time. So unpunctual means not on time. And so the person writing this is making the observation that the further he's from the UK, he's from England, and the further east you go, the more unpunctual things become. And then he's thinking, so what happens if you go all the way to China? If you go that far east, are things really unpunctual there? A little joke. All day long we seem to dawdle. Dawdle is an interesting word. That means wasting time. Being lazy, not being... It's like the opposite of being in a hurry. So a lot of times, if you want someone... This is rude, so don't do it unless you want to be rude. But a lot of times if you want someone to hurry, you'll say, don't dawdle. That means don't be lazy. Don't take your time. Don't stop and talk to people. Don't waste time. Wait, I made a mistake here and I just want to fix it because I'm using a web browser to read this, but I downloaded the PDF and I think that would be better. Okay, you don't need to know that, I guess. That's probably too much information. But I just realized I did that. So I'm just going to read from the PDF instead of the web browser. So now I'm dawdling. I'm wasting time. Sorry for dawdling. Okay. All day long we seemed to dawdle through the country, which was full of beauty of every kind. And sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills. If you could have a hill like this, think about a hill like this. That would be pretty easy to walk up. Now think about a hill like this. That would be very difficult to go up. That's a steep hill. Steep is about the inclination. And a steep hill would be very difficult to walk up. Steep stairs, those are not very comfortable to walk up either, or a steep mountain. All day long we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of steep hills, such as we see in old missals, and sometimes we ran by rivers and streams which seemed from the wide stony margin on each side of them to be subject of great floods. It takes a lot of water and running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. At every station there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Attire is another way of saying clothing. So, he's traveling from Western Europe to Eastern Europe. In the 19th century, people wore a lot of different kinds of clothes back then. So they were wearing all different kinds of attire, all different styles of clothes. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers. But others were very picturesque. When you call something picturesque, that means it makes a beautiful picture. It's a very beautiful picture. So, I like Italy because of the picturesque mountains. Everywhere you go, you can take beautiful pictures of mountains. The women looked pretty, except when you got... The women looked pretty, except when you got near them. So they look pretty from far away, but when you get close, they're not so attractive, according to this. But they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering. Fluttering, we've had that word in several books that we've done. I never realized what a popular word that was, but fluttering is like the movement of wings, like of a butterfly, maybe sometimes a bird, or maybe a flag moving in the wind. That's fluttering. And most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like dresses in a ballet. But of course, there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats and great baggy dirty white trousers and white linen shirts and enormous heavy leather belts nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots with their trousers tucked into them, and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They're very picturesque. Remember, that means they make a beautiful picture, but do not look prepossessing. On the stage, they would be set down at once as some old Oriental band of brigands. They are, however, I'm told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place, being practically on the frontier, for the Borgo Pass leads from it into Bukovina. It has had a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks of it. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc. Havoc is a word like chaos, if you know that word, disorganization, bad things happening, a lot of confusion, havoc. It made terrible havoc on the 5 separate occasions. In the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege. This word, to undergo something, it means something happens to you and it's bad. So, where were you last week? I didn't see you. I underwent a surgery. That means I had this bad experience of a surgery. The bad experience of a surgery happened to me. So you can usually use that when when something happens to you. I wouldn't use it for a cold or something, but when it says, let's see, how is it used here? At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege. A siege is when an army attacks a town. So that's a bad experience for the town. The town underwent a siege of 3 weeks and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Krone Hotel, or I should say the Golden Krone Hotel, which I found, to my great delight, to be a thoroughly old-fashioned, for of course I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door, I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman. So, cheer, well, you probably know that, but I'll just explain it anyway. Cheer means happiness. So a cheery-looking elderly woman is a happy-looking woman, very happy-looking. In the usual peasant dress, white undergarment with a long double apron, front and back of colored stuff fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close, she bowed and said, "The Herr Englishman?" "Yes," I said. "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt sleeves who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter. "My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place is kept on it for you. At the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend Dracula. 4th of May. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count, directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me. But on making inquiries as to the details, he seemed somewhat reticent. If you're reticent about something, it means you're hesitating, like you don't want to do it. So he learned that Count Dracula had written a letter to the owner of the hotel saying, be sure that he has the best seat on the coach. But when he looks at the old man, the elderly man, he seems like he's hesitating, like he doesn't want to do something. He seems reticent, like he's trying to avoid doing something, hesitating, and pretended that he could not understand my German. Let's read that again. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count directing him to secure, like that means like to find, the best place on the coach for me. But on making inquiries as to details, so he's asking about what am I supposed to do? How long does it take? Where am I going to sit? The landlord didn't want to really help him. He seemed reticent. He was sort of hesitating. And he pretended, it says, and pretended he could not understand my German. So suddenly he doesn't want to help him anymore. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly. At least he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way, and he mumbled. Mumbling is speaking but not clearly. That's mumbling. He mumbled out that money had been sent in a letter, and that was all he knew. And when I asked him if he knew Count Dracula and could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife crossed themselves. So that's what Catholics do when they're scared. In case you don't know that. So suddenly he's suspicious. What's going on? What did he say? When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula, so I don't know if any other people do that, but Catholics do that. If they're scared and they're asking God for help, they'll do this. That's crossing yourself. And so he says, "Do you know Count Dracula?" That's how you know that they're scared. And he and his wife crossed themselves, and saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. And it was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, for it was all very mysterious and not by any means comforting. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in a hysterical way, "Must you go? Oh, young here, must you go?" She was in such an excited state, and seemed to have lost her grip of what German she knew, and mixed it all up with some other language which I did not know at all. I was just able to follow her by asking many questions, and when I told her that I must go at once, that I was engaged on important business, she asked again, "Do you know what day it is?" I answered, "It's the 4th of May." And she shook her head, and she said again, "Oh yes, I know that, but do you know what day it is?" On my saying that I did not understand, she went on. And went on means continue. She continued. It's the eve of St. George's Day. When you have a holiday, you know the term evening, right? Good evening. So that eve means nighttime. And, well, it doesn't really, I guess, but it's used that way. So Christmas Eve is the night before Christmas. And New Year's Eve, that's December 31st, that's the night before New Year's Day. So that word is used a lot in connection with holidays. And so she says it's the eve of St. George's Day. And that means that tomorrow, the next day, what is it, May 5th or May 6th? I don't know. But that's going to be St. George's Day. It's the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway? What it says to have full sway, that means that, that kind of implies that normally these evil things do not have the authority or power to act. But on this special night, all the evil, horrible things in the world have full power to do whatever they want. That's what that means. No limitations, no limits. All the evil things will have full sway. Do you know where you're going? And what you are going to? She was in such evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go. So she begged. She said, please, please don't go. At least wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I didn't feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I tried to raise her up, and I said as gravely, that means seriously, as gravely as I could, that I thanked her. But my duty was imperative, and that I must go. She then rose, and she dried her eyes, and taking the crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I didn't know what to do, for as an English churchman, I've been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolatrous. And yet it seems so ungracious to refuse an old lady meaning so well and in such a state of mind. She saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for she put the rosary around my neck and said, "For your mother's sake." That's using that word "sake." It's pretty common in English. And maybe you're not sure, maybe you've seen that before, but you're not really sure how it's used. And really, when you see that, it kind of means think about this person. So, she offers the rosary to him, and she can see that he doesn't want to take it. So she says, think about your mother. Don't do it because you want to do it. Do it because you should be thinking of your mother. So do it for your mother's benefit, for your mother's sake. It's very common when you're frustrated. You can say, "Oh, for God's sake." That means, it means like, "Oh, think of God," but it's just used for when people are feeling frustrated. They say that when they have nothing else that they can do about a situation. Okay, let's see. So she says, "Take it for your mother's sake." I'm writing up this part of the diary whilst I'm waiting for the coach, which is, of course, late. And the crucifix is still around my neck. Whether it's the old lady's fear, or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I don't know. But I'm not feeling nearly as easy in my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach Mina before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. 5th of May, the castle. The gray of the morning has passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seems jagged. If you're thinking, if you're traveling in the dark in a very mountainy area, you could think about the sun rising or setting, and what you would see is like the shadow of all the mountains. And think about the shape. It's kind of like this. You don't really see the mountains, you just see the shape, and it looks like this. That's what jagged is. Let's just look at a couple of pictures of jagged. And I'm just typing the word jagged, but all the pictures you get are really of mountains, because that shape of going up and down, I imagine if somebody had jagged teeth, those would be pretty ugly teeth. My teeth are a little jagged, so I can say it, insulting anyone. Wait, let's see. It's all mountains. They don't show anything else, but it could be anything. Oh, look at these lines. These are jagged lines. So that's how you would describe that shape, jagged. Let's see. How did he use it here? The castle. The gray of the morning has passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seems jagged. So the horizon is sort of where the sky and the land meet. So when you look, and if you don't see trees or houses or buildings, if it's just land and sky, that's where the land and the sky meet. That's the horizon. And this is a jagged horizon because there are a lot of mountains. The gray of the morning has passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seems jagged. Whether with trees or hills, I know not, for it is so far off that big things and little are mixed. So actually, he doesn't know if they're hills or mountains or trees, because everything is so far away. He can just see the line where the sky and the land meets, and he doesn't know what that is, but it's jagged. There are many odd things to put down. When he says put down here, he means write, to record, to write down. There are many odd things to put down, and lest who reads them may fancy that I denied too well before I left Bistritz, let me put down my dinner exactly. I dined with what they called robber steak, bits of bacon, onion, and beef seasoned with red pepper and strung on sticks and roasted over the fire in simple style of the London cat's meat. The wine was golden Mediasch, which produces a queer sting. We've already seen that word queer. That means strange, unusual, with a queer sting on the tongue, which is, however, not disagreeable. I had a couple of glasses of this and nothing else. When I got on the coach, the driver had not taken his seat when I saw him talking to the landlady. They were evidently talking of me, for every now and then they looked at me, and some of the people who were sitting on the bench outside the door came and listened, and they looked at me, most of them pityingly. Pity is when you feel bad for someone, like, oh, poor person, that poor person. So they're all off onto the side. He's in the coach, and all these people are talking and then looking at him, and some of them are looking at him like, poor guy. Oh, poor guy. They're looking at him pityingly. I could hear a lot of words, often repeated, queer words. Remember, queer means strange, unusual. Unusual words, queer words, for there were many nationalities in the crowd. So I quietly got my polyglot dictionary from my bag and looked them out. Polyglot, poly means many and glot means languages. So this is not just like an English-German dictionary. This is an English, many different languages dictionary. I must say that they were not cheering to me, for amongst them were Ordog, Setan, Poko. Oh wait, these are translations. So Ordog, Satan, that's the devil. Pokol, hell, Stragoica, witch, Vrolak, or Vlkoslak, both mean the same thing, one being Slovak and the other being Serbian, for something that is either werewolf or vampire. Memo: I must ask the Count about these superstitions. Oh, he'll be learning all about the superstitions, won't he? When we started, the crowd round the inn door, which had by this time swelled to a considerable size, all made the sign of the cross. Remember, this is making the sign of the cross. That's what Catholic people do when they're worried or frightened or concerned. And pointed 2 fingers at me. With some difficulty, I got a fellow passenger to tell me what they meant. He would not answer at first, but on learning that I was English, he explained that it was a charm, or a guard against the evil eye. This was not very pleasant for me, just starting for an unknown place to meet an unknown man. But everyone seemed so kind-hearted, so sorrowful, and so sympathetic, that I could not but be touched. I shall never forget the last glimpse which I had of the inn yard and its crowd of picturesque figures. Remember that word, picturesque, means it makes a beautiful picture. All crossing themselves. As they stood round the wide archway with its background of rich foliage and oleander and orange trees and green tubs clustered in the center of the yard. Then our driver, whose wide linen drawers is another word for pants in this case, or trousers. Then our driver, whose wide linen drawers covered the whole front of the box seat, Gotza they called them, cracked his whip over his 4 small horses, which ran abreast, and we set off on our journey. I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears and the beauty of the scene as we drove along, although had I known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to throw them off so easily. Because before us lay a green sloping land full of forests and woods, and here and there steep hills crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses. Clumps means like groups, so it's not really just one tree, it's like 4 or 5 or 6 trees together in a group, a clump of trees. And maybe you could, if you see a small village, you know, it's not just one house, but it's a small village, so it's not a lot of houses. 5, 6, 7 houses. That would be a clump of houses. Crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses and blank gable end to the road. The blank gable end to the road. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom. Bewildering means confusing or makes you feel lost. Maybe it's better. I always say that bewildering is like confusing, but maybe you could use it to mean like it's so confusing it makes you feel lost. There was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom. Apple, plum, pear, cherry. And as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees, spangled with fallen petals. In and out amongst these green hills of what they call here the Middle Land, ran the road, losing itself as it swept round the grassy curve, or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods, which here and there ran down the hillsides like tongues of flame. The road was rugged. Rugged, you know, these days we always expect the road to be very nice and comfortable, but in the past, maybe the roads would be more like this and very uncomfortable to go through. That would be a rugged road. Well, let's look at a picture. I'm not really satisfied with the explanation I'm giving you. Here. This is a rugged road. That would not be very comfortable to go down in a coach with horses, or even with a car, a modern car. That would not be comfortable. But that's a rugged road. The road was rugged, but still we seemed to fly over it with a feverish haste. Haste means very quickly. Haste means only caring about time and not quality. So in this case, the implication is that the person driving the coach with the horses, he doesn't care about how comfortable the people are in the back. He only cares about going as quickly as possible. I could not understand then what the haste meant. So he's saying, I can't understand why he was going so quickly. Why was it necessary to travel so quickly, and make us all feel very uncomfortable? And he says, how did he say that again? I could not understand then. So, it's like he's writing this later in life. So he's saying then, at the time, when it was happening, I couldn't understand. Now he understands, but before he didn't. I couldn't understand then what the haste meant. But the driver was evidently bent on losing no time in reaching Borgo Prund. I was told that this road is in summertime excellent, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. In this respect, it's different from the general run of roads in the Carpathians, for it is an old tradition that if they are not to be kept in too good order, of old the hospodars would not repair them, lest the Turk should think that they were preparing to bring in foreign troops, and so hasten the war, which was always really at loading point. Pachu Yadav says, hello. Hi, Pachu. Thank you for joining today. We're reading Dracula because it's Halloween time. We have to read a scary story. Beyond the green swelling hills of the middle land rose mighty slopes of forest up the lofty steeps of the Carpathians themselves. Right and left of us they towered. I've had that word tower before as a verb in other books. I remember that in 1984, but I also think in Gone with the Wind and maybe a couple of others. When you know what a tower is, if it's a noun, it just means a very tall building. That's a tower. But if you use tower like a verb, it means something is very high and it makes everything else look small. So if I say the trees towered over me, that means the trees were very, very tall, and it made me look or feel very small. The towering mountains, that means mountains that are very tall and make you feel very small. How did he use it here today? Let's see. Right and left of us they towered. He's talking about the mountains and the trees. So to the right and left of us, everything towered over us. It was very tall and made us feel very small. With the afternoon sun falling full upon them and bringing out all the glorious colors of this beautiful range, deep blue and purple in the shadows of the peaks, green and brown where grass and rock mingled. When things mingle, that means they're together, they're mixed, they're all mixed up. Pachu says, Happy Halloween. Thanks, Pachu. Happy Halloween to you, too. Let's see. Where did we stop? Oh. In the shadows of the peaks, green and brown, where grass and rock mingled. So the grass and the rocks were mingled. Mingled means like mixed. Here you see a little bit of grass, and then you see some rock. And then more grass, and then some rock. It's all mixed together. and an endless perspective of jagged rock. Remember, jagged, it means very uneven. And pointed crags, till these were themselves lost in the distance where the snowy peaks rose grandly. Here and there seemed mighty rifts in the mountains, through which, as the sun began to sink, we saw now and again the white gleam of falling water. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of the hill and opened up the lofty, snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we wound on our serpentine way, to be right before us. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in there. One of my companions, I'm just reading this again. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round. Well, I think we've talked about sweep before, but let me show you a picture of something. What do you call this object? What is this? That's a broom, and what you do with a broom is you move like this. Whoosh, 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 like that. That action is called sweeping. Whoosh. And a lot of things sweep, not just brooms. The wind can sweep. Whoosh. That's the sweeping wind. And if you sweep around a corner, that means you move very quickly around the corner. Whoosh, like the wind. Let's see. There's a lot in that last sentence. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept around the base of a hill and opened up the lofty... they've used that word lofty a couple of times already. If you think about the word lift, what does that mean? Lift. That means bringing something up into the air. Think about the German airline Lufthansa. That's the same word. Luft, lift. It means going up in the air, something like that. And so lofty means high up. Something like, well, I'm not really happy with that. Let me just get a better definition for you. Lofty. High or tall, yeah, something high, something in the air, something like that. So let's read that again. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of the hill and opened up the lofty, so high up in the air, snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we wound... Oh, we've got the word wind here. Let's take a look at winding. Winding is, maybe we should start with this. I don't know if you could recognize a toy like this. Maybe you've seen a toy like this before. It's kind of old-fashioned. People like to collect these sorts of things now, but have you ever seen a toy like this? Do you know how that moves? You see that thing in the bottom, in the back, that's called a key, and you have to do this. You have to do this movement. That's winding. This is called a winding toy because you have to do this movement, winding. Let's see if I... Or maybe I like old watches. I know everybody likes to use Apple watches or smart watches or something, but I like the old watches. Those are my favorite. I like to collect those. And a lot of them don't use a battery. A lot of them, the way that you make it work is you have to do this. And then it will run for a couple of days, and then you have to do that again. And you have to wind the watch. So winding is kind of like turning repeatedly. But now let's take a look at another situation here. Based on that explanation, maybe you could imagine, maybe it would be easy for you to imagine that this is called a winding road, because it's really that same sort of I guess it's not really related, but we call it a winding road. Or what about a winding river? This is a winding river. That's a nice picture. I just want to stay here in this beautiful picture. But that's a winding river. So when things move like this, we call that winding. Now, they're using the word serpentine here, and a serpent is a snake. That's another word, another way to say snake. So you could use that like an adjective. You could say serpentine. That's an adjective. That means like a snake. So if I say the serpentine road, that's a road that's in the shape of a snake. Does that make sense? It's getting pretty complicated. There's a lot of complicated vocabulary in one sentence. But so a serpentine road or a serpentine river would be a river in the shape of a snake, winding. Now that we've reviewed all those words, let's just go back to the paragraph and see if we can make sense of this last sentence. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept round the base of a hill and opened up the lofty snow-covered peak of a mountain, which seemed, as we moved around like this, our serpentine way to be right before us. Pachu says, I started watching some of the videos. Your video lessons are very useful. I like to request one lesson of any film watching and pausing between. Oh, do you know I tried that. I tried a couple of movies, and what I was very careful. I looked for movies that didn't have any copyright on them. And I used Google. I said movies with no copyright. And then there was the first web page was a collection of thousands of movies where there was no copyright. And I did a couple of those. And then I got in big trouble by YouTube. And like serious trouble, like almost lost my channel because of that. And they, I wanted to tell them, but, YouTube and Google are the same company. And Google is the one who said these movies are okay. So you should think they're okay too. But you can't argue with them. They're not interested in hearing any of that. So I will never ever do another movie on YouTube. Because I don't want to lose my channel. It took me like 2 or 3 years to get 3,000 subscribers. I don't want to lose it just like that and start from zero. But I thought that was a wonderful idea, but I'm not doing it. No way. Let's see. Okay. Look, Istensek, God's seat. He crossed himself reverently. So again, crossing yourself. This is what Catholic people do when they're worried or scared or frightened or confused. As we wound our endless way and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to creep round us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountain top still held the sunset and seemed to glow out with the delicate, cool pink. Here and there we passed Czechs and Slovaks. Oh, Czechs. We passed Czechs and Slovaks in a picturesque attire. Remember, picturesque means it makes a beautiful picture. And attire is clothing. So in clothing, you could take a beautiful picture the way they were dressed. Picturesque attire. But I noticed that the goiter was painfully prevalent. What? Let me look at that again. So he's saying we pass all these people, they're dressed beautifully, but a lot of people have a goiter. Let me show you what a goiter is. I don't know how useful a word that is, but they don't show any pictures of it. Oh, okay. Here's one. This is not so bad, though. I've seen some really horrible ones. A goiter is I don't know what causes it. I guess it's like a deficiency in some kind of vitamin or mineral, but it makes a big lump here. That's a goiter. So he's observing that all the people they look beautiful, but they all have goiters. David Garcia says, "Hi, teacher. Dracula for Halloween. Excellent." Yeah, that's why I'm doing it for Halloween. I want to try to read it before Halloween finishes, but I only have 9 days, so I'm doing 2 chapters. I don't think I'll finish it by then, but close enough. We'll try. Pachu says, "Goiter, deficiency of salt." Yeah, some kind of, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that sounds right. But I noticed that goiter was painfully prevalent. When you say that something is prevalent, that means you see it a lot. It's not everywhere, but it's very frequently seen. By the roadside were many crosses, and as we swept by, remember, sweep by, whoosh, going very quickly like the wind. As we swept by, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman kneeling before a shrine, who did not even turn round as we approached, but seemed in the self-surrender of devotion to have neither eyes nor ears for the outer world. There were many things new to me. For instance, hayricks in the trees. I don't know what a hayrick is. Let's take a look at that. Oh, okay. It's just hay is like grass, like dried grass, and a hayrick is just, I've never heard that term before. I think I would call it a bale, but a bale, I don't know farm vocabulary. But a bale is very small. Like this, I think would be a bale of hay bale. But I guess a hayrick is very big, or maybe it's both. I don't know. There were many things new to me, for instance, hayricks in the trees. So they were putting them in the trees. That's strange. That is strange. And here and there, very beautiful masses of weeping birch. Weeping means like crying, but some trees are called weeping. There are some trees that look like they're very sad or crying. I know weeping willow. I've never heard of a weeping birch, but a birch is a type of tree. Their white stems shining like silver through the delicate green of the leaves. Now and again, we passed a later wagon, the ordinary peasant's cart, with its long, snail-like vertebra. I'm not sure what he's describing. I'm sorry I have to take a break because my dog is looking at me saying, "Let me go outside." So I better let her go out. I'll be back in 1 minute, okay? All right. Sorry about that. Let's keep reading. Oh, I want to look at Later Wagon because I'm having a difficult time picturing what he's describing. Let's see if we can find a picture. Okay, now I understand. Let me show you this picture. Because he says it's shaped like a snail. I guess I could see it. Calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. On this were sure to be seated quite a group of homecoming peasants, the Czechs in their white, and the Slovaks in their coloured sheepskins, and the latter carrying lance fashion their long staves with axe at end. As the evening fell, it began to get very cold, and the growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness, the gloom of the trees, oak, beech, and pine, though in the valleys which ran deep between the spurs of hills as we ascended means going up, as we went up through the pass, as we ascended the pass. The dark firs, a fir is a type of tree, stood out here and there and against the background of late-lying snow. Sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods that seemed in the darkness to be closing down upon us, great masses of grayness, which here and there bestrewed the trees. When something is strewn, that means it's sort of hanging. But let's see. Let's look at a picture of strewn. Oh, that's not what I pictured. It means it's everywhere, I guess. But they're using it like garbage. But when I think of strewn, I think of something being hung. Let's see if there are any pictures like that, or if that's just me. No, I guess. Now I want to see the definition. I can't believe how wrong I was about that word. Oh, that's good that I look it up. Let's see. I'm asking ChatGPT. Scattered or spread around. The papers were strewn across the desk. Debris was strewn all over the streets. Okay, but I don't know. I mean, I understand why it's saying that, but I still, I imagine like decorating a Christmas tree. The ornaments are strewn. I don't know. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, it means everywhere. So let's see. What was strewn? Everywhere in a disorganized way. Bestrewed. Well, he's using a different kind of word, but it's still the same thing. Great masses of grayness, which here and there bestrewed the trees. So you could see little patches of grayness everywhere. Produced a peculiarly weird and solemn effect, which carried on the thoughts and grim fancies engendered earlier in the evening, when the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds which, amongst the Carpathians, seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. So again, you've got that word wind, which means, moving like in the shape of an S, like in the shape of a snake. Sometimes the hills were so steep. Again, we were talking about mountains or hills. This would be a nice hill to walk up. But imagine trying to walk up this kind of hill. That's a steep hill. That would be very uncomfortable. Pachu, are you the one in Nepal? Right? Aren't you in Nepal? Or am I thinking of somebody else? But anyway, if you're in Nepal, then you must probably have a lot of steep areas. Let's see. Sometimes the hills were so steep that, despite our driver's haste, the horses could only go slowly. I wished to get down and walk up them, as we do at home, but the driver would not hear of it. "No, no," he said, "you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce." And he added, with that he evidently meant for grim pleasantry, for he looked round to catch the approving smile of the rest. Wait, let me read that again. "The dogs are too fierce," and then he added, with what he evidently meant for grim pleasantry. That's weird. For he looked round to catch the approving smile of the rest. I guess that could mean, like, maybe he was saying, "No, the dogs are too scary." And then he looked around at the other people like, he doesn't know what we're talking about, but we know. Something like that, I guess. "And you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep." The only stop he would make was at a moment's pause to light his lamps. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement amongst the passengers, and they kept speaking to him, one after the other, as though urging him to further his speed. So he doesn't know what the people in the carriage and the coach are saying, but it seems like they're saying, "Come on, go faster, let's get out of here." He lashed the horses, like whipping. He lashed the horses unmercifully with his long whip, and with wild cries of encouragement urged them on to further exertions. And then, through the darkness, I could see a sort of patch of gray light ahead of us, as though there were a cleft in the hills. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. The crazy coach rocked on its great leather springs and swayed. Swaying is this movement. This is swaying. So imagine they're on this very rough road, going fast, so the carriage is moving like this, and all the people in the carriage, in the coach, are moving, they're swaying. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. The crazy coach rocked on its great leather springs and swayed like a boat tossed in a stormy sea. I had to hold on. The road grew more level, and we appeared to fly along. Then the mountains seemed to come nearer to us on each side and to frown down upon us. We were entering the Borgo Pass. One by one, several of the passengers offered me gifts, which they pressed upon me with earnestness, which would take no denial. So the passengers were saying, "Here, take this." And they did it with earnestness, which means they did it with a lot of energy, with a lot of enthusiasm, with a lot of determination. And they would not accept no. He had to take it. He couldn't say no. These were certainly of an odd and varied kind, but each was given in simple good faith with a kindly word and a blessing. And the same strange mixture of fear-meaning movements which I had seen outside the hotel at Bistritz, the sign of the cross, and the guard against the evil eye. Then, as we flew along, the driver leaned forward on each side of the passengers, craning over the edge of the coach, peered eagerly into the darkness. It was evident that something very exciting was either happening or expected. But though I asked each passenger, no one would give me the slightest explanation. This state of excitement kept on for some little time, and at last we saw before us the pass opening out on the eastern side. There were dark, rolling clouds overhead, and in the air the heavy, oppressive sense of thunder. It seemed as though the mountain range had separated two atmospheres, and that now we had got into the thunderous one. I was now myself looking out for the conveyance which was to take me to the Count. Each moment I expected to see the glare of lamps through the blackness, but all was dark. The only light was flickering rays of our own lamps, in which the steam from our hard-driven horses rose in a white cloud. We could see now the sandy road lying white before us, but there was on it no sign of a vehicle. The passenger drew back with a sigh of gladness, which seemed to mock my own disappointment. So, this is the point where they have to leave him. Somebody from Count Dracula is supposed to take him to the castle from this point. So they're all in the carriage, and he's thinking, where is it? There's nobody here. And he's disappointed because he wants to go. And he's a little bit angry because the other passengers are thinking, oh, I'm so happy there's nobody here. So he's thinking, why are they acting like that? I want to go. And they seem to be happy that there's no one here for me. I was already thinking what I had best do, when the driver, looking at his watch, said to the others something which I could hardly hear. It was spoken so quietly, in so low a tone, I thought it was an hour less than the time. And then turning to me, he spoke in German, worse than my own. There's no carriage here. The Herr is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina, and return tomorrow or the next day. Better the next day. So the driver, I think, is saying, well, there's nobody here for you, so you have to continue with us. He wants this man to continue to the next town. Whilst he was speaking, the horses began to neigh. Neigh is the sound of a horse. That's my horse impression. That's neighing. Let's see. Whilst he was speaking, the horses began to neigh and snort. Snorting is and plunge wildly. Plunging means going down. So the horses are going, they're going down and snorting. So that the driver had to hold them up. And then amongst a chorus of screams from the peasants and a universal crossing of themselves, a caleche with 4 horses drove up behind us, overtook us, and drew up beside the coach. I could see from the flash of our lamps, as the rays fell on them, that the horses were coal black and splendid animals, and they were driven by a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes. So gleaming, that's like the light reflecting from an eye. Not from an eye, from anything. It could be anything, but in this case, it's an eye. So it's very dark out, and he's trying to look at the driver of this other carriage, of this other coach. And he could see the shapes of a long beard, but it's so dark that mostly what he can just see is the light reflecting from the lamps, the gleam from his eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight as he turned to us. So this isn't just regular yellow or white light. This is red, which is kind of scary. And he said to the driver, "You're early tonight, my friend." The man stammered in reply. Stammering is when you talk like this, that's stammering. The man stammered in reply, "The English Herr was in a hurry." To which the stranger replied, "That is why, I suppose, you wished him to go on to Bukovina? You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are swift." So before this man arrived, the driver was saying, "Oh, nobody's here. Let's go. Let's go to Bukovina." And then this person arrives, and the man is saying, "Why are you so early? Why are you an hour early?" And the driver says, "Well, he was in a hurry." Oh, really? He was in a hurry. That's why you told him to go to the next town with you. So it's getting a little spooky. It's getting a little spooky. As he spoke, he smiled, and the lamplight fell on the hard-looking mouth with very red lips and sharp-looking teeth, as white as ivory. One of my companions whispered to another in the line from Burger's Lenore. Den die Toten reiten schnell, for the dead travel fast. The strange driver evidently heard the words, for he looked up with a gleaming smile. Gleaming. Again, gleam kind of means like shining. You can see his teeth. He's smiling. The stranger evidently heard the words, for he looked up with a gleaming smile. The passenger turned his face away, at the same time putting out his 2 fingers and crossing himself. "Give me the Herr's luggage," said the driver, and with exceeding alacrity, my bags were handed out and put in the caleche. Then I descended from one side of the coach, as the caleche was close alongside, the driver helping me with a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel. His strength must have been prodigious. Without a word, he shook his reins. So the reins, that's how you control a horse. So if you shake the reins, that's telling the horses to move. Without a word, he shook his reins, and the horses turned, and we swept. Again, there's that word sweep, meaning, it kind of means like moving like the wind. We swept into the darkness of the pass. As I looked back, I saw the steam from the horses of the coach, and by the light of the lamps, and projected against it figures of my late companions crossing themselves. Then the driver cracked his whip and called to his horses, and off they went on their way to Bukovina. As they sank in the darkness, I felt a strange chill, and a lonely feeling came over me. But a cloak was thrown over my shoulders. I'm just going to show you what a cloak is. It's kind of like an old-fashioned coat. People still sometimes wear cloaks in certain situations, but this is a cloak. I felt a strange chill, and a lonely feeling came over me, but a cloak was thrown over my shoulders, and a rug across my knees, and the driver said in excellent German, "The night is chill, mein Herr," and my master, the Count, bade me to take all care of you. There's a flask of Slivovitz, the plum brandy of the country, underneath the seat, if you should require it. I did not take any, but it was a comfort to know that it was there all the same. I felt a little strangely, and not a little frightened. I think there had been any alternative I should have taken it instead of prosecuting that unknown night journey. The carriage went at a hard pace, straight along, and then we made a complete turn and went along another straight road. It seemed to me that we were simply going over and over the same ground again. So it's in the middle of the night, it's very dark, and he's got this strange feeling that they're just going around in a circle. Then we made a complete turn and went along another straight road. It seemed to me that we were simply going over and over the same ground again. You can use over and over to mean like again and again. It's very common, actually, to use over to mean again, but only if you use that phrase over and over. I told you over and over, stop it. I told you again and again. I told you many times. I told you repeatedly. So he says, it seems like we were going over and over. It seems like we just kept continuing repeatedly going in the same direction, going in the same circle, let's say. I would have liked to ask the driver what this all meant, but I really feared to do so, for I thought that, placed as I was, any protest would have left no effect in case there had been an intention to delay. So he wants to ask about it. He wants to say, what's going on? Why are we just going around in a circle? But what did he say? He said, would have had no effect in case there had been any. Maybe he was thinking because he arrived an hour early that, I don't know if you know the expression killing time. Maybe he thought that the driver was trying to kill time. By and by, however, as I was curious to know how time was passing, I struck a match. You may not know what a match is. I don't know how often people use these anymore. This is a match to start a fire. And you strike a match. By and by, however, as I was curious to know how time was passing, I struck a match, and by its flame looked at my watch. It was within a few hours of midnight. It was within a few minutes of midnight. This gave me a sort of shock, for I suppose the travel superstition about midnight was increased by my recent experiences. I waited, with a sick feeling of suspense. Then a dog began to howl. Remember, howling is the sound of a dog. Oh, that's howling. Then a dog began to howl somewhere in a farmhouse far down the road. A long, agonized wailing. Wailing means crying. So wailing is like loud crying. As if from fear. The sound was taken up by another dog, and then another, and another, till, borne on the wind which now sighed softly through the pass, a wild howling began, which seemed to come from all over the country, as far as the imagination could grasp it through the gloom of the night. At first howl, the horses began to strain and rear, but the driver spoke to them soothingly. So the horses began to react in a very nervous way at all these dogs howling. And so the driver spoke to them. To soothe someone means to make them feel relaxed. Soothing music is relaxing music. Soothing words are words that make you feel calm and relaxed. So if the driver is soothing the horses, he's saying, be quiet, it's okay, it's okay, calm down, everything is okay. The driver spoke to them soothingly, and they quieted down, but shivered and sweated as though after a runaway from a sudden fright. Then, far off in the distance from the mountains, on each side of us began a louder and sharper howling, that of wolves, which affected both the horses and myself in the same way. For I was minded to jump from the caleche and run, whilst they reared again and plunged madly, so that the driver had to use all his great strength to keep them from bolting. Bolting means like running away very quickly. In a few minutes, however, my own ears got accustomed to the sound, and the horses so far became quiet that the driver was able to descend to stand before them. You know, I live in a forest. A big, big forest, all alone. And the forest is full of dogs, so I hear that every night. Oh, all kinds of dogs, and they join in, and now I'm going to be scared tonight when I go to sleep. He petted and soothed them. So petting is doing this. And remember, soothing means make you feel relaxed. So he petted them and soothed them. He made them feel relaxed and whispered something in their ears, as I've heard of horse tamers doing. And with extraordinary effect, for under his caresses, this is a caress, this is the same thing, this is caressing, they became quiet. They became quite manageable again. Though they still trembled, the driver again took his seat and, shaking his reins, started off at great pace. This time, after going to the far side of the pass, he suddenly turned down a narrow roadway which ran sharply to the right. Soon we were hemmed in with trees. That means like surrounded by trees, which in places arched right over the roadway till we passed, as through a tunnel. So, also over the top. It was like going through a tunnel. And again, great frowning rocks guarded us boldly on either side. Though we were in shelter, we could hear the rising wind, for it moaned, moaning as, ooh, that's moaning. And sometimes, if you live in a windy place, maybe you have heard the wind moaning. That happens sometimes. The wind makes a sound. Oh, that's a sound, moaning sound. The wind moaned and whistled through the rocks, and the branches of the trees crashed together as we swept along. We've been seeing that word. I'm glad I covered that word, sweep, which means sort of moving like the wind. It grew colder and colder still, and fine, powdery snow began to fall, so that soon we and all around us were covered with a white blanket. The keen wind still carried the howling of the dogs, though this grew fainter. Fainter means weaker. So this keen wind still carried the howling of the dogs, though this grew fainter. So he could still hear the howling of the dogs, but that sound has become much weaker, much softer, fainter, as we went on our way. The baying of the wolves sounded nearer and nearer. But now they're getting closer. Who cares about the dogs? Now they're getting to the wolves. Those are the scary ones. And they're coming closer, as though they were closing round on us from every side. I grew dreadfully afraid, and the horses shared my fear. The driver, however, was not in the least disturbed. He kept turning his head to the left and to the right, but I couldn't see anything through the darkness. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint flickering blue flame. If you imagine like lighting a candle in the wind, can you imagine how the flame would move? Like that, like moving around. Sometimes light, sometimes no light, sometimes light, sometimes no light. That's flickering. It's like a very unstable fire. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint flickering. So faint, remember, means weak. Not very strong. He could see a little flame somewhere far away. Flickering. Light, no light, light, no light. Because it's windy. And the driver saw it at the same moment. He at once checked the horses and, jumping to the ground, disappeared into the darkness. But I didn't know what to do, the less as the howling of the wolves grew closer. But while I wondered, the driver suddenly appeared again, and without a word took his seat. We resumed our journey. I think I must have fallen asleep. I kept dreaming of the incident, for it seemed to be repeated endlessly, and now looking back, it's like sort of an awful nightmare. Once the flame appeared so near the road that even in the darkness around us, I could watch the driver's motions. He went rapidly to where the blue flame arose. So they're traveling down the road again, and he can still see the flame. Have you ever driven in the darkness and you're driving down the road and there's a car in front of you and you think it's far away because it's very dark and you can only see a few lights. And then suddenly you realize it's right in front of you. I think that's kind of the sensation he's describing here, in a way. But it's weird. The flame seems to be following them. So it's like somebody is holding a candle and following the coach as they go. Once the flame appeared so near the road that even in the darkness around us I could watch the driver's motions. He went rapidly where the blue flame arose. It must have been very faint, for it did not seem to illumine the place around it at all. And gathering a few stones, formed them into some device. Once there appeared a strange optical effect. When you see that word optic, that has to do with the eyes or things that you can see. It's really about the eyes. So an optical effect means some kind of thing, some kind of, maybe you can't tell if it's real or not. You see it and you're not sure if it's real or not. It's something that you see, but maybe it's not exactly, you can tell that there's something wrong with it, something strange. So, I mean, imagine if you're traveling in the dark and it seems like there's somebody following you with a candle, which isn't possible since you're moving very quickly with the horse. But imagine how the flame might move and you might think, is it close? Is it far away? Or, there's something, you're seeing something, but it can't be true. That's an optical effect, I guess. And let's see. Maybe I should shut up and we should continue reading and we'll figure it out. Once there appeared a strange optical effect. When he stood between me and the flame, he did not obstruct it. Okay, so imagine, you've got the driver and you can see the flame and the driver moves like this, and yet he could still see the flame, but he shouldn't be able to. That's the optical effect. Like, that can't be right. That must be some kind of trick with my eyes. For I could see its ghostly flicker all the same. This startled me. But as the effect was only momentary, I took it that my eyes deceived me, straining through the darkness. Straining means working really hard. So if it's dark outside, you have to work really hard to see things. That's straining to see. Then for a time there were no blue flames, and we sped onwards through the gloom, with the howling of the wolves around us, and as though they were following us in a moving circle. At last there came a time when the driver went further afield than we had yet gone, and during his absence the horses began to tremble worse than ever, and to snort and to scream with fright. I could not see any cause for it, for the howling of the wolves had ceased altogether. Cease means stop. So the howling of the wolves stopped, ceased. But just then the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind the jagged, remember jagged means not very even, of a beetling, pine-clad rock. By its light I saw around us a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They were 100 times more terrible in the grim silence which held them than even when they howled. So suddenly he can see all the wolves surrounding them, and it was better. It was scary to hear them howling before, oh, but this was 1,000,000 times more scary to just see them there in silence, staring at him. For myself, I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. So if you're paralyzed, that means you can't move. So he was paralyzed with fear. He was so scared he couldn't make any kind of movement, paralyzed with fear. It's only when a man feels himself face to face with such horrors that he can understand their true import. All at once the wolves began to howl. Oh, howl, as though the moonlight had had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jumped about and reared, and looked helplessly round with eyes that rolled in a way painful to see, but the living ring of terror encompassed them on every side, and they had perforce to remain with it. I called to the coachman to come, for it seemed to me that our only chance was to try to break out through the ring and to aid his approach. I shouted and beat the side of the caleche, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from the side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there I know not, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command. Imperious, if you think about the word empire, that's like it's sort of like you have emperor, that's kind of like a king, and you have an empire, that's like a kingdom. To be imperious means to talk like you're in charge, to talk like you're the king. Imperious. That's usually not used in a positive way, like, why are you speaking to me so imperiously? Why are you talking like you're in charge of me, like you have power over me, like you're my king? But here it's interesting because the driver is talking to these scary wolves imperiously, like he's in charge of them. He's their king. Go away. How he came there I know not, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command, and looking towards the sound, saw him stand in the roadway as he swept his long arms. Again, we have that word sweep. He swept his long arms as though brushing aside the impalpable obstacle. So imagine there are these scary wolves and the driver just says, "Leave here, go away," like he's in charge of them. The wolves fell back, and back further still, and just then a heavy cloud passed across the face of the moon, so that we were again in darkness. When I could see again, the driver was climbing into the caleche, and the wolves disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny. That word uncanny has become rather popular recently because they talk about the uncanny valley. Uncanny means very strange, difficult to explain. Well, I don't trust my definition though. Let me get a second opinion on that. Something strange, mysterious, makes you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, uncanny. So this was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed interminable. You have that word terminate, which means to end, to finish. And then you have able, which means can. So terminable means can finish. But then when you add in, that makes it negative, and that means can't finish, never finishing, never ending. So this whole situation seemed like it would never end. It seemed interminable. As we swept on our way, there we go. That was a very popular word in this chapter. Swept on our way. Now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. We kept on ascending, with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main always ascending. Suddenly, I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses into a courtyard of a vast means very big, ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line across the sky. Okay, that was the end of chapter 1. I said we were going to do chapter 1 and 2 today, so I better keep my promise, right? But I'm going to take a 1-minute break before we start reading chapter 2, so I will be right back. All right. Are you ready to start chapter 2? Let's keep going. This is Jonathan Harker's Journal Continued, chapter 2, 5th of May. I must have been asleep, for certainly, if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach of such a remarkable place. You know the word remark? That just means to make a comment. And so if something is remarkable, that usually means something to talk about, something that you could mention, something that you could say. And it's usually, it could be used to talk about negative things or positive things. So when he calls it a remarkable place, it's definitely amazing, but we don't really know if he feels positive about this or negative about this. In the gloom, the courtyard looked of considerable size, and as several dark ways led from it under great round arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I've not yet been able to see it by daylight. When the caleche stopped, the driver jumped down and held his hand to assist me to alight. Again, I could not but notice his prodigious strength. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice. Let me show you what a vice is. So if you make things, if you're a handy person, then you probably would use, I'm trying to find a better picture, because if you've never used one of these, you probably say, well, I don't know. I don't know what that's for. It's when you're making things, it's a way to, you you put something there, and then it holds it in place so you can work on it. So if you're manufacturing things, you probably would use a vise to help you. Yeah, that's, you can use vice in other ways, like vice president. But a vice means holding something. Well, it means many things, but one way that you can use it, it means to hold something very, very hard. So when it says his hands were like a vice, it's like something like this grabbed your hand. Not very nice. Again, I could not but notice how prodigious his strength was. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice. Steel is metal, a type of metal, that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. Then he took my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to the great door, old and studded with iron nails. I'll just stop here and to show you what studded means. Studs are, again, this is a word that could mean many different things. It depends on how you're using it or what the context is. But studs are like pieces of metal. Okay, so when I look up studded, I just get a lot of this. But let me show you a studded door. It's kind of a very old sort of door. Oh, where is it? Let's do studded door. I don't know if you can see. Oh, this is a good picture. See the studs on the door? This is a studded door. Then he took my traps and placed them on the ground beside me, as he stood close to a great door, old and studded with large iron nails, and set in a projecting doorway of massive stone. I could see even in the dim light that the stone was massively carved. Massive means very big. But that carving had been much worn by time and weather. As I stood, the driver jumped again into his seat and shook the reins, and the horses started forward, and trap and all disappeared down one of the dark openings. So he just dropped him off in front of this big giant door without saying anything and left. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. Of bell or knocker there was no sign. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings, it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. So he's saying that everything is so big and thick that if he tried to say, "Hey, let me in," nobody would hear him. Everything is just too thick and too big. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to? And among what kind of people? What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this a customary incident in life of a solicitor's clerk sent to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? Solicitor's clerk. Mina would not like that. Solicitor. For just before leaving London, I got word that my examination was successful, and I am now a full-blown solicitor. Full-blown means like 100%. So before, a clerk is somebody who does paperwork. So a solicitor is a type of lawyer. So a solicitor's clerk, that's just it's like a secretary. But he just passed his examinations, and he's no longer just a clerk. Now he's a real solicitor. A full-blown solicitor, like 100% solicitor. I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I were awake. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me, and I expected that I should suddenly awake and find myself at home, with the dawn struggling in through the windows, as I had now and again felt in the morning after a day of overwork. But my flesh answered the pinching test. I don't know, maybe in your culture you don't do this. I don't know how obvious this is, but it's kind of a joke. People don't really want you to do this, but when something really crazy happens, either really crazy, wonderful, good, or really crazy, horrible, you might say to someone, pinch me to see if I'm dreaming, because the idea is if you pinch the person, it will hurt and they'll wake up. So a lot of times people will say, pinch me, and that means, am I dreaming? They don't really want you to pinch them. Don't pinch them. But they're just saying, am I dreaming? Is this a dream? And he says, but he pinched himself and he passed the pinching test. It was not a dream. It was really happening. He could feel the pain. I was indeed awake and among the Carpathians, and all I could do now was be patient and to wait the coming of morning. Just as I had come to this conclusion, I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door, and saw through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts. Rattling is this... It's that sound. So I heard the rattling of chains. And clanking, that's the sound of metal hitting metal, like this. That's clinking. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A bolt, in case you don't know what a bolt is, I'll show you a bolt. This is a bolt. So we heard the sound of rattling chains and then the clinking of bolts. Somebody was opening the door. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and clanking of massive bolts draw back. A key was turned, and a loud, grating voice of long disuse, and the great door was swung back. The door was opened. Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven, save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot. Clad means like wearing something, like clothes, wearing clothes. So if he was clad in black, that means he was wearing all black. Covered. Maybe you think of clad as the word covered. Covered in black. Clad in black. Clad in black from head to foot, with a single speck of color about him without. A single speck. Speck is just like a little piece, a little dot, a little... Oh gosh, no, let's just look at a word. Let's look at the word speck, because I don't think that I'm explaining it very well. Oh no, that's the name of some kind of meat. Wait, let's see. Okay, this is a good example of speck. If we look at this sky, you look up at the sky, all you can see are little specks of light. These are little specks of light. And I don't even know if you would call the green one a speck of light, but the little purple ones and the little yellow ones, those are little specks. So he's saying without a speck of color. The man is completely dressed in black, covered in black, not even a speck of color. without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burned without a chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows. Quivering is kind of a shaky movement like this. So he's holding this old lamp, and on the wall you can see the shadows moving, quivering, as it flickered in the draft of the open door. And the old man motioned me in. This is motioning someone in. Come in. This is motioning, just means moving. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with a courtly gesture. Courtly means like very good manners, let's say. Very high manners. So he was a very formal kind of person. So he wasn't me, look at me, I'm motioning you in my way. But this is a very well-mannered person, making beautiful movements, a courtly gesture. Saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own free will." And he made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, we've had that word before in other books. Threshold is the space of a door. So you have the outside of a room, and then you have the inside of the room, and that space in between both, where the door is, that's the threshold. So Jonathan is outside still, the door is open, and the Count is inside, and Jonathan passes through the threshold, that small area that's not in or out. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, so now he's in the building, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand, he grasped mine. To grasp something is to hold it very tightly, with a strength which made me wince, and wincing is how the face that you would make in pain. I can't do it. Oh, that hurts. Wincing. So he grabbed the hand so tight it hurt, and he made a facial expression of pain. He winced. An effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man, and he said, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring." The strength of the handshake was so much akin to that which I had noticed in the driver. Remember, the driver was very strong too. Remember, his hand was like a vice, whose face I had not seen, that for a moment I doubted if it were not the same person to whom I was speaking. So, to make sure, I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?" He bowed in a courtly way. So remember, courtly means like in a very elegant, formal way. He bowed. Now, he didn't, this is bowing. This is how I bow. But he's Count Dracula. He's very well-mannered and elegant. So he bows in a very beautiful, elegant way, in a courtly way. He bowed in a courtly way as he replied, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house. Come in. The night air is chill, and you must need to eat and rest." As he was speaking, he put the lamp on a bracket on the wall, and stepping out, took my luggage. He carried it in before I could forestall him. I protested, but he insisted. "Nay, sir, nay, you are my guest. It is late, and my people are not available." Nay is just an old-fashioned word for no. Let me see to your comfort myself." He insisted on carrying my traps along the passage and then up a great winding stair. So we've had that word winding before. So this is not just stairs going like this. These are stairs that go like this. Up a great winding stair, but probably because it's a castle, it probably isn't like this. It's probably more just like this. Small detail. And along another great passage on whose stone floor our steps rang heavily. At the end of this he threw open a heavy door, and I rejoiced to see within a well-lit room in which a table was spread for supper, and on whose mighty hearth a great fire of logs, freshly replenished, flame and flared. The Count halted. Halted means stopped or paused. Putting down my bags, closed the door, and crossing the room, opened another door, which led into a small octagonal room, lit by a single lamp and seemingly without a window of any sort. Passing through this, he opened another door and motioned me to enter. So remember, when you motion someone to enter, you're doing this. Motion just means move. He motioned me to enter. He didn't say, come in. He used his hands. But he did it in a courtly way. So he said, come in. I don't know. I don't know how to do that. It was a welcome sight, for here was a great bedroom, well lighted and warmed with another log fire, also added to, but lately, for the top logs were fresh, which sent the hollow roar up the wide chimney. The Count himself left my baggage inside and withdrew, saying before he closed the door, "You will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilet." That really just means, because I know you recognize the word toilet, but really toilet in this sense means like making yourself fresh or cleaning yourself or making yourself look nice. So that's really where that word toilet comes from. The toilet room is the room where you make yourself nice. Refresh yourself, something like that. That's why, it's kind of funny because when women, it's I think mostly used for women. I don't know if it's used for men. I guess it could be used for men also. But, that's a French word, toilet. So they have eau de toilette, it means toilet water. So if you think of the word toilet water, in the sense that you probably know it, that's disgusting. But really what it means is like water to make yourself fresh is really what it means. And that's perfume. That's what perfume is. So when you go to buy expensive perfume, it will say eau, that means water, de toilette, toilet water. Very different meanings. Okay, let's see. So you will need, after your journey, to refresh yourself by making your toilet. I trust you will find all you wish. When you're ready, come into the other room where you will find your supper prepared. The light and warmth and the Count's courteous welcome seem to have dissipated all my doubts or fears. Dissipate means it goes from like strong to weak. So by the time Jonathan arrived at the castle, he was very afraid and very suspicious. What's going on? This place is crazy. But the Count is so nice and polite and well-mannered, and he's thought of all of these different comforts for him, that all of his fears went from strong to, they slowly melted. Imagine like the melting ice. His fears melted. His fears dissipated. The light and warmth of the Count's courteous welcome seemed to have dissipated all my doubts and fears. Having them reached my normal state, I discovered that I was half famished with hunger. To be famished means to feel very hungry. So making my hasty toilet, again, that means like washing my face, making myself nice, refreshing myself, I went into the other room. I found supper already laid out. My host, who stood at one side of the great fireplace, leaning against the stonework, made a graceful wave of his hand to the table. So, here's me. I would say, go over there and eat, but not the Count. He's very elegant. So he makes a graceful wave of his hand. Sit down, eat. I pray you be seated, and sup how you please. You will, I trust, excuse me that I do not join you, but I have dined already, and do not sup. I handed to him a sealed letter which Mr. Hawkins had entrusted to me. He opened it and read it gravely. Gravely means seriously. Then, with a charming smile, he handed it to me to read. One passage of it, at least, gave me a thrill of pleasure. I must regret that an attack of gout, from which malady I am a constant sufferer, forbids absolutely any traveling on my part for some time to come, but I am happy to say I can send a sufficient substitute, one in whom I have every possible confidence. He is a young man, full of energy and talent in his own way, and a very faithful disposition. He is discreet and silent. Discreet means someone who doesn't attract a lot of attention. Someone who will not share your secrets. He is discreet and silent, and has grown into manhood in my service. He should be ready to attend on you when you will during his stay, and shall take your instructions in all manners. The Count himself came forward and took off the cover of a dish, and I fell at once on an excellent roast chicken. This, with some cheese and a salad and a bottle of old Tokay, of which I had 2 glasses, was my supper. During the time I was eating it, the Count asked me many questions as to my journey, and I told him by degrees all I had experienced. By this time I had finished my supper, and by my host's desire had drawn up a chair by the fire and begun to smoke a cigar which he offered me, at the same time excusing himself that he did not smoke, and I had now an opportunity of observing him, and found him of a very marked physiognomy. That means that he looked unusual. Let's just say that. His face was a very strong aquiline, with a high bridge of the thin nose and a peculiarly arched nostrils. These are your nostrils here. Wait, let's see. He had a very strong... his face was very strong and a very strong aquiline. I don't know what aquiline means. Let's take a look at that. Okay, it means like resembling an eagle. So he had a very strong looking face that sort of looked like an eagle. Okay, and he had arched nostrils. With lofty domed forehead, and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely elsewhere. That means his hair, these are your temples. So there was no hair around here, but there was a lot of hair everywhere else. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl up in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as I could see it under the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips. So that's the famous fangs. The protrude means to go out. So the teeth are very white and they protrude over the lips. They go out over the lips. On an animal, those 2 teeth are called fangs. And if you're talking about a vampire, you would also call those fangs. But people don't have fangs, only vampires and animals. So Don't tell someone they have fangs unless you think they're horrible, evil people. Demons. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale, and at the tops extremely pointed, so his ears were pointy. The chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm though thin. The general effect was one of extraordinary pallor. Hitherto, I had noticed the backs of his hands as they lay on his knees in the firelight, and they seemed rather white and fine. But seeing them now close to me, I could not but notice that they were rather coarse, broad. Coarse means very rough, not smooth. Coarse, if you know the word smooth, coarse is the opposite of smooth. So his, let's see. What were coarse? But seeing them now close, I'm just going to read this again. I had noticed the backs of his hands. Okay, the backs of his hands were coarse, not smooth. Broad with squat fingers. Strange to say, there were hairs in the center of the palm. So this is the palm, and there was hair. The nails were long and fine and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over me and his hands touched me, I could not repress a shudder. Shuddering is when you go like this. Ooh. And he says, I could not repress it. That's rude, right? That, he's in the Count's house talking to him in the Count's castle. And when the Count touched him, this is how he reacted. He shuddered. I could not repress a shudder. It may have been at this breath. It may have been at his breath. It may have been that his breath was rank, so he had bad breath. But a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which, do what I would, I could not conceal. So he's disgusted. He feels very disgusted, and he cannot hide it. He cannot conceal it. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back. Drawing back means moving back. And with a grim sort of smile, which showed more than he had yet done, his protuberant teeth, sat himself down again on his own side of the fireplace. We were both silent for a while, and as I looked towards the window, I saw the first dim streak of the coming dawn. Wow, it's already morning time. There seemed a strange stillness over everything, but as I listened, I heard as if from down below the valley the howling of many wolves, and the Count's eyes gleamed, and he said, "Listen to them, children of the night." That's like a famous line from the movie. Listen to them, children of the night, what music they make. Seeing, I suppose, some expression in my face strange to him, he added, "Ah, sir, you dwellers in the city cannot enter into the feelings of the hunter." And then he rose and said, we've talked about that word dwell. We've seen that in other books. Dwell means to live in a place. So technically, you can call a house a dwelling. That's a place where people live. So it's not normal to call a house a dwelling, but you could. You could call it a dwelling. To dwell somewhere means to live somewhere. So he says, you dwellers in the city, you people who live in the city. And that's actually, it's a pretty common word. It's used in a lot of different situations. Did you ever have a problem where you couldn't find a solution, so you were very worried, and you're always thinking, how do I fix this problem? Your friend might say, don't dwell on it, which means don't live there. Don't live in that problem. Put some distance between you and the problem, and maybe you'll find an answer. But so don't dwell on it means don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Really means don't live there. But you must be tired. Your bedroom is all ready, and tomorrow you shall sleep as late as you will. I have to be away till afternoon, so sleep well and dream well." With a courteous bow, he opened for me himself the door. With a courteous bow, he opened for me himself the door to the octagonal room, and I entered my bedroom. I'm all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my soul. God keep me, if only for the sake of those dear to me. 7th of May. It's again early morning, but I've rested and enjoyed the last 24 hours. I slept late in the day and awoke of my own accord. When you do something of your own accord, that means you do it without anybody pushing you. So it kind of means I did it alone, I did it by myself, I didn't need anybody's help. It could mean a lot of different things. But so when you see that phrase, I woke of my own accord, that means nobody helped me, nobody pushed me to wake up. I just woke up naturally. I awoke of my own accord. And when I had dressed myself, I went into the room where we had supped, and found a cold breakfast laid out, with coffee kept hot by a pot being placed on the hearth. There was a card on the table, on which was written, "I have to be absent for a while. Do not wait for me. D." I set to and enjoyed a hearty meal. Well, when I had done, I looked for a bell so that I might let the servants know that I had finished, but I couldn't find one. There are certainly old deficiencies in the house, considering the extraordinary evidences of wealth which were around me. The table service is of gold, and so beautifully wrought that it must be of immense value. The curtains and upholstery just means like fabric. Maybe especially fabric for chairs or sofas or something like that. That's how you talk about fabric for furniture. So the curtains and the fabric on the furniture, the upholstery of the chairs and the sofas, and the hangings of my bed are of the costliest and most beautiful fabrics, and must have been of fabulous value when they were made, for they were centuries old, though in excellent order. I saw something like them in Hampton Court, but they were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. I just want to show you a picture of the word frayed, or what that means. Let's take a look at that. Frayed is what happens to fabric or cloth when it's old. You see these edges, the edges around in the middle it's still kind of okay, but around the edges it's very bad. That's frayed. This is frayed fabric, frayed cloth. This is frayed. It's what happens when cloth becomes old. Look at this. Frayed jeans. Those are frayed. Sorry, I'm just readjusting this so I can see. I saw something like them in Hampton Court, but those were worn and frayed and moth-eaten. But still, in none of the rooms is there a mirror. There's not even a toilet glass on my table. So remember, toilet means like refreshing yourself with water, cleaning yourself, fixing your hair. So he's saying there wasn't even a toilet mirror on my table. A mirror where I could take care of my appearance. And I had to get the little shaving glass from my bag before I could either shave or brush my hair. I have not yet seen a servant anywhere or heard the sound near the castle except the howling wolves. Some time after I had finished my meal, I don't know whether to call it breakfast or dinner, for it was between 5 and 6 o'clock when I had it. I looked about for something to read, for I did not like to go about the castle until I had asked the Count's permission. There was absolutely nothing in the room, book, newspaper, or even writing materials, so I opened another door in the room and found a sort of library. The door opposite mine I tried, but found locked. In the library, I found to my great delight a vast number of English books, whole shelves of them, and bound volumes of magazines and newspapers. A table in the center was littered with English magazines and newspapers, though none of them were of very recent date. The books of the most varied kind: history, geography, politics, political economy, botany, geology, law, all relating to England and English life and customs and manners. There were even such books of reference as the London Directory, the Red and Blue Books, Whitaker's Almanac, and Army and Naval lists, and somehow gladdened my heart to see it, the Law List. Whilst I was looking at the books, the door opened, and the Count entered. He saluted me. Salute. Soldiers do salutes, but I don't think that's what is meant here. Salute could also mean like greeted me, said hello, which it wouldn't be common to use that, so don't use that to mean say hello, but I think it just means he greeted him. He said hello. He saluted me in a very hearty way, and hoped that I had a good night's rest, and then went on. I'm glad you found your way in here, for I am sure there is much that will interest you. These companions, and he laid his hand on some of the books, have been good friends to me for some years past. Ever since I had the idea of going to London, have given me many, many hours of pleasure. Through them I have come to know your great England, and to know her is to love her. I long to go through the crowded streets. We've had that word several times recently. Always. Long is to desire something very strongly, to desire it with all of your heart. So when he says, I long to go to London, that means I want to go to London with all my heart. I long to go through the crowded streets of your mighty London, to be in the midst of the whirl and rush of humanity, to share its life, its change, its death, and all that makes it what it is. But alas, as yet I only know your tongue through books. To you, my friend, I look that I know it to speak. But Count, I said, you know and speak English thoroughly. He bowed gravely. Indeed, I said. Oh wait, I skipped a line. I thank you, my friend, for all your all too flattering estimate, but yet I fear that I am but a little way on the road I would travel. True, I know the grammar and the words, but yet I know not how to speak them. Indeed, I said, you speak excellently. No, not so, he answered. Well, I know that. Did I move and speak in your London? None there are who would not know me for a stranger. That is not enough for me. Here I am noble. I am a boyar. The common people know me, and I am master, but a stranger in a strange land. He is no one. Men know him not, and to know not is to care not for. I am content if I am like the rest, so that no man stops if he sees me, or pauses in his speaking if he hears my words. Ha ha! A stranger. I've been so long master that I would be master still, or at least that none other should be master of me. You come to me not alone as agent of my friend Peter Hawkins of Exeter, to tell me about my new estate in London. You shall, I trust, rest here with me a while, so that by our talking I may learn the English intonation. And I would tell you, and I would that you tell me when I make error, even of the smallest, in my speaking. I'm sorry that I had to be away so long today, but you will, I know, forgive one who has so many important affairs in hand. Of course I said all I could about being willing, and asked if I might come into that room when I chose, and he answered yes, certainly, and added, You may go anywhere you wish in the castle, except where the doors are locked, where of course you will not wish to go. There's reason that all things are as they are. And did you see with eyes that know with my knowledge you would perhaps better understand? Oh, Dracula's got a very weird way of talking. Let's try that again. There is reason that all things are as they are. And did you see with my eyes? And did you see with my eyes, and know with my knowledge, you would perhaps better understand. I said I was sure of this, and then went on. So he's saying, you can go anywhere except where the doors are locked, but you don't want to go there anyway. Because if you could see what I see, and if you could understand what I understand, you would definitely not want to go in those rooms. So that's a little bit mysterious. We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things. Nay, from what you've told me of your experiences already, you know something of the strange things there may be. This led to much conversation, and it was evident that he wanted to talk, if only for talking's sake. And I asked him many questions regarding things that had already happened to me or come within my notice. Sometimes he sheered off the subject, or turned the conversation by pretending not to understand, but generally he answered all I asked most frankly. Then as the time went on, and I had got somewhat bolder, I asked him some of the strange things of the preceding night, as for instance why the coachman went to the places where he had seen the blue flames. He then explained to me that it was commonly believed that on a certain night of the year, last night in fact, when all evil spirits are supposed to have unchecked sway, a blue flame is seen over any place where treasure has been concealed. The treasure has been hidden, he went on. In the region through which you came last night, there can be but little doubt, for it was the ground fought over for centuries by the Wallachian, the Saxon, and the Turk. Why, there is hardly a foot of soil in all this region that has not been enriched by the blood of men, patriots or invaders. In the old days, there were stirring times. Stirring means moving, so I guess you could maybe think of stirring here as meaning chaotic, a lot of chaos, a lot of movement. In the old days, there were stirring times, when the Austrian and the Hungarian came up in the hordes, and the patriots went out to meet them, men and women, the aged and the children too, and waited their coming on the rocks above the passes, so that they might sweep destruction on them with their artificial avalanches. When the invader was triumphant, he found but little, for whatever there was had been sheltered in the friendly soil. So he's saying in the old days, the people would hide up in the mountains and they would push rocks on the invaders. But that didn't actually stop them. Eventually the invaders were able to make their way into the villages. But it was too late because they had buried all of their treasures from them. "But how," said I, "can it have remained so long undiscovered, where there is sure index to it, if men will but take the trouble to look?" The Count smiled, and as his lips ran back over his gums, the long, sharp canine teeth showed out strangely. Canine means like dog. So remember, dogs have fangs. They have those long teeth in the front of the mouth, and those are called fangs. Cats have them too. A lot of animals have those. And those are, even here, even in a human, you call those canine teeth, but canine means dog teeth. "Because your peasant is at heart a coward and a fool. Those flames only appear on one night, and on that night no man of this land will, if he can help it, stir without his doors. And, dear sir, even if he did, he would not know what to do. Why, even the peasant that you tell me of, who marked the place of the flame, would not know where to look in the daylight, even for his own work. Even you would not, I dare be sworn, be able to find these places again." "There, you're right," I said. "I know no more than the dead were even to look for them." Then we drifted into other matters. "Come," he said at last, "tell me of London and of the house which you have procured for me." Procure means to get. So tell me about London and tell me about the house that you have bought for me. So I think the arrangement maybe is that Count Dracula contacted this lawyer in London and said, "Okay, I want to buy a house. You get the house for me and I will pay you the money." And that's why he's using procure. With an apology for my remissness, I went into my own room to get the papers from my bag. And whilst I was placing them in order, I heard rattling of china. So remember, rattling is this sound. That's rattling. And china, maybe you don't know this, but we use the word china to talk about porcelain plates. So, especially if they're expensive. So, usually you have like your everyday plates that you use, and then you have very expensive, beautiful plates made of porcelain for special occasions, and you call that china. So, he said he could hear in the other room the rattling of china. Think about plates touching each other. I heard the rattling of china and silver in the next room, and as I passed through, noticed that the table had been cleared and the lamp lit, for it was by this time deep into the dark. The lamps were also lit in the study or library, and I found the Count lying on the sofa, reading, of all things in the world, an English Bradshaw's Guide. And when I came in, he cleared the books and papers from the table, and with him I went into plans and deeds and figures of all sorts, and he was interested in everything, and he asked me a myriad of questions. Myriad means many, a lot. About the place and its surroundings, and he clearly had studied beforehand all he could get on the subject of the neighborhood, for he evidently, at the end, knew very much more than I did. And when I remarked this, he answered, "Well, but my friend, is it not needful that I should? When I go there, I shall be all alone, and my friend Harker, Jonathan, pardon me. I fall into my country's habit of putting your patronymic name first. My friend Jonathan Harker will not be by my side to correct and aid me. He will be in Exeter, miles away, probably working at papers of the law with my other friend, Peter Hawkins. So We went thoroughly into the business of the purchase of the estate at Purfleet. When I told him the facts and got his signature on the necessary papers, and had written a letter with them ready to post to Mr. Hawkins, he began to ask me how I had come across so suitable a place. I read to him the notes which I had made at the time, and which I inscribe here. At Purfleet, on a by-road, I came across just such a place as seemed to be required, and where was displayed a dilapidated notice. Dilapidated means in very bad condition. So if there's a dilapidated notice, that means it's like maybe a very old notice, a very old sign, that the place was for sale. It was surrounded by a high wall of ancient structure, built of heavy stones, and has not been repaired for a large number of years. The closed gates are of heavy old oak and iron, all eaten with rust. The estate itself is called Carfax, no doubt a corruption of the old Ketrafas, as the house is four-sided. Agreeing with the cardinal points of the compass, it contains all or some 20 acres, quite surrounded by the solid stone wall above mentioned. There are many trees on it, which makes it in places gloomy, and there's a deep, dark-looking pond or small lake, evidently fed by some springs, as the water is clear and flows away in a fair-sized stream. The house is very large, and of all periods back, I should say. What that means, at all periods back, means it's very old. So the back means in the past, and periods means, there was the Victorian period, then the Georgian period, then, maybe the Elizabethan period. At least that's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong. I should say to medieval times. So that means that possibly the house is maybe 1,000 years old, or at least several hundred years old. For one part is of stone immensely thick, with only a few windows high up and heavily barred with iron. It looks quite the part of a keep, and it's close to an old chapel or church. I could not enter it, as I had not the key of the door leading to it from the house, but I have taken with my Kodak views of it from various points. Oh, that's funny. I think this story was written in the 1890s. In Kodak, you may not know this because everybody takes pictures with their telephones now, but Kodak was a very famous company for producing film and also cameras. But I had no idea it was that old, that it was a product in the 1890s. So when he says I took pictures with my Kodak, that means his camera. But I have taken with my Kodak views of it from various points. The house has been added to, but in a very straggling way, and I can only guess at the amount of ground it covers, which must be very great. There are but few houses close at hand, one being a very large house, only recently added to and formed into a private lunatic asylum. Lunatic means crazy. So the closest building next to this house is a place where they keep crazy people, like a hospital for crazy people. It is not, however, visible from the grounds, so you can't see it. Don't worry, you can't see it. When I had finished, he said, "I'm glad that it is old and big. I myself am of an old family, and to live in a new house would kill me. A house cannot be made habitable in a day, and after all, how few days go to make up a century. I rejoice also that there is a chapel of old times." A chapel is a small church. "We Transylvanian nobles love not to think that our bones may lie amongst the common dead. I seek not gaiety nor mirth, Both of those words mean like happiness. Gay means happy, mirth means happy. Not the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling waters which please the young lady, which please the young and gay. I'm no longer young, and my heart, through weary years of mourning over the dead, is not attuned to mirth. Moreover, the walls of my castle are broken, the shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and the shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I may. Somehow, his words and his look did not seem to accord. Accord means agree. So he's saying words, but the way that he looks doesn't seem to agree with what he's saying. His body language is not matching his words. Or else it was that his cast of face made his smile look malignant and saturnine. So malignant, that word, when you see that word mal, that means evil or bad. So a malignant person is like an evil person. Or if he has a malignant smile, that means like an evil smile. Saturnine, well, Saturn is a god. I don't remember which one. I'm not sure which type of god. Let's just find the meaning of Saturnine. I'm looking for which god is Saturn. That's like a Roman god, but Saturnine, a person slow and gloomy, depressed, mysterious. So he looked malignant, which is like evil, and mysterious, Saturnine. But that's a pretty fancy word. Like if you use the word Saturnine, you might impress somebody giving you a test. But in normal conversation, nobody would say that. Even malignant isn't a very common word. Presently, with an excuse, he left me, asking to pull my papers together. He was some little time away, and I began to look at some of the books around me. One was an atlas, which I found open naturally to England, as if that map had been much used. On looking at it, I found certain places, little rings marked, and on examining these, I noticed that one was near London, on the east side, manifestly where this new estate was situated. The other two were Exeter and Whitby and Yorkshire coast. It was the better part of an hour when the Count returned. "Aha!" he said. "Still at your books. Good. But you must not work always. Come. I am informed that your supper is ready." And he took my arm, and we went into the next room, and when I found an excellent supper ready on the table, the Count again excused himself, as he had dined out on his being away from home. But he sat, as on the previous night, and chatted whilst I ate. After supper I smoked, as on the last evening, and the Count stayed with me, chatting and asking questions on every conceivable subject, hour after hour. I felt that it was getting very late indeed, but I could not say anything, for I felt under obligation to meet my host's wishes in every way, and I was not sleepy. As the long sleep yesterday had fortified me, but I could not help experiencing that chill which came over one at the coming of dawn, which is like, in its way, the turn of a tide. They say that people who are near death die generally at the change to dawn, or at the turn of the tide. Anyone who has, when tired, and tied, as it were, to his post, experienced this change in the atmosphere can well believe it. All at once we heard the crow of the cock. The crow of the cock. Cock is a rooster. Sorry, but I can't make that noise. But now you get the idea. The crow of the cock. Cock is a rooster. Crow is that sound. Coming off with the preternatural shrillness through the clear morning air. Count Dracula, jumping to his feet, said, "Why, there's the morning again. How remiss I am to let you stay up so long. You must make your conversation regarding my dear new country of England less interesting, so that I may not forget how time flies by us." And with a courtly bow, he quickly left me, and I went to my room and drew the curtains. But there was little to notice. My window opened into the courtyard, and all I could see was the warm gray of quickening sky. So I pulled the curtains again, and have written of this day, 8th of May. I began to fear, as I wrote in this book, that I was getting too diffuse. I think diffuse here means like distracted, not focused. But now I am glad that I went into detail from the first, for there's something so strange about this place, and all in it, that I cannot but feel uneasy. To feel uneasy means to feel uncomfortable. I wish I were safe out of it, or that I had never come. It may be that this strange night existence is telling on me. But would that there were all. Oh, but would that were all. You know, there's this construction would, and then you say like would that, and then you say something, and that's kind of talking about your desire, the thing that you want. Would that I were rich. That means I wish I was rich. It's not a very common thing in modern or contemporary English to use that. You probably will never hear somebody talk like that. But it keeps occurring in this book, so I feel like I have to mention it. It's just a way of expressing a wish. Let me read that again. So he's describing all the things that make him feel uncomfortable. This makes me uncomfortable. This makes me uncomfortable. And then he says, would were that all? Meaning, I wish that was the only thing that was making me uncomfortable. He's about to tell us something else that's even worse. So let's see what that is. But would that were all. If there were anyone to talk to, I could bear it. But there's no one. I have only the Count to speak with me, and he, I fear, I am myself the only living soul within the place. Let me be prosaic so far as the facts can be. I just want to check the definition of that word prosaic. These are not common words. You don't have to really know these words, but let's take a look. Prosaic, something that's dull, ordinary, or lacking in imagination or excitement. So that's like a fancy way of saying, let me be clear. But if you use that, I think a lot of people wouldn't know what you were talking about. If you said, let me be prosaic. It's too unusual, at least in contemporary English. Well, let's see how it was used here again. Let me be prosaic as far as the facts can be. So he's going to say the facts in a very clear, plain, easy to understand way. It will help me to bear up, and imagination must not run riot with me. If it does, I'm lost. Let me say at once how I stand, or seem to. I only slept for a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep any more. Oh, hi 9-Volt, how are you doing today? Haven't seen you in a while. I only slept a few hours when I went to bed, and feeling that I could not sleep any more, got up. I had hung my shaving glass by the window and was just beginning to shave, and suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder and heard the Count's voice saying to me, "Good morning." I started. We've had that word start many times. This does not mean begin. This does not mean I began. This means I was shocked. I was surprised. That's started. When you're scared and you make this movement, when you jump because you're scared, that's starting. Think of the word startled. That means surprised. I started, for it amazed me that I had not seen him, since the reflection of the glass covered the whole room behind me. In starting, I had cut myself slightly, but did not notice it at the moment. Having answered the Count's salutation, so I think we saw that before when it said the Count saluted me. Saluting is this, but in contemporary English it's that. But salute could mean saying hello. So a salutation means some kind of greeting, some kind of hello. The Count's salutation, the Count's greeting. I turned to the glass again to see how I had been mistaken. This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me. I could see him over my shoulder, but there was no reflection of him in the mirror. So he's getting ready, shaving himself and looking in the mirror, and the Count came in to greet him, say hello, which scared him because he didn't see him in the mirror, but he was there. He was there. The whole room behind me was displayed, but there was no sign of a man in it except myself. This was startling. So there's that word start again, meaning surprised, not beginning, not begin. This was startling. This was surprising. This was scary. And coming on the top of so many strange things was beginning to increase that vague feeling of uneasiness which I always have when the Count is near. But at the instant I saw that the cut had bled a little, so he cut himself. And the blood was trickling over my chin. You know that word trickle, which we probably have seen before, but I just want to show you a picture of it. Let's see if we can... No, that's not a good picture. I think this is probably the best. Well, wait. Okay, this is a good one. Trickling is a type of movement of water, but it's a sort of a slow movement of water. You might know the word dripping. So dripping is like one drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, but trickling is more of a smooth movement. So if you say the faucet is dripping, that would be drip, drip, drip. But trickling, there's like maybe constant water, but it's just a little bit. So he was so surprised when he was shaving that he cut himself and he was bleeding and there was blood trickling down his chin. The blood was trickling over my chin. I laid down the razor, turning as I did so half round to look for some sticking plaster when the Count saw my face. His eyes blazed with a sort of demoniac fury. And he suddenly made a grab at my throat. So the Count saw the blood and he wanted it. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed. Fury is extreme anger. The fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there. "Take care," he said. "Take care how you cut yourself. It is more dangerous than you think in this country." And then seizing means taking by force. Seizing the shaving glass, he went on. "And this is the wretched thing that has done the mischief. It is a foul bauble of man's vanity. Away with it." When you say away with it, that's kind of like, let's put it in the garbage. Don't talk like that. Nobody, that's like an old way of talking. People don't talk like that anymore. Throw it away. That would be modern. Away with it. And opening the window with one wrench of his terrible hand, he flung means throw, fling, flang, flung. No, fling, flung, flung. He had flung. I think it's flung, yeah. It just means throw. Let's see. He flung out the glass. He threw out the glass. He threw it out the window, which was shattered into 1,000 pieces on the stones of the courtyard far below. Then he withdrew without a word. Withdrew means he left. He left the room without a word. It was very annoying, for I do not see how I am to shave unless in my watch case or the bottom of the shaving pot, which is fortunately of metal. When I went into the dining room, breakfast was prepared, but I could not find the Count anywhere, so I breakfasted alone. And it's strange that as yet I have not seen the Count eat or drink. He must be a very peculiar man. Peculiar means strange. After breakfast, I did a little exploring in the castle. I went out on the stairs and found a room looking towards the south. The view was magnificent, for from where I stood there was every opportunity of seeing it. The castle is on the very edge of a terrific precipice. Precipice is kind of a fancy word for edge. So, imagine if the castle was on top of a mountain, and then you have the castle, but the mountain is like this. Not like this, but like this. Then the castle is on the precipice, it's on the very edge. A stone falling from the window would fall 1,000 feet. That would be like 300 meters. Without touching anything. And as far as the eye can reach is a sea of green treetops, with occasionally a deep rift where there is a chasm. Here and there are silver threads where the rivers wind in deep gorges through the forest. There's that word wind again. Moving like a snake, moving in the shape of an S. The rivers wind in deep gorges. Gorges are like deep holes, deep, long, big holes. But I am not in heart to describe beauty, for when I had seen the view, I explored further. Doors, doors, doors everywhere, and all locked and bolted. In no place save from the windows and the castle walls is there an available exit. The castle is a veritable prison, and I am the prisoner. All right. Well, that was the end of chapter 2, so I think we're going to stop here for the day. Thank you for watching and listening, and thank you for your questions and comments, and I hope to see you here again tomorrow. I'll try to make it tomorrow, where we can read chapter 3 and 4. I want to try to read the whole thing before Halloween. All right, well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again later. Goodbye.